career-based, I think when you have those opportunities, dig in, and if you come out on the other side, or if you fail 3 or 4 times and you keep pushing, you keep figuring it out, I think you end up on the other side of that with a lot of confidence and character.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the MentorZ podcast. Today we have on George Forman III. George is the founder of Everybody Fights, a professional boxer, trainer, coach, and son of businessman and 2-time heavyweight champion George Forman. George has worked hard and fought all of his life as an athlete and now as an entrepreneur. He embraces the concept in life that everybody fights, and through his gym, his mission is to make you the best fighter you can be, in the ring and in life. George taught me some incredible lessons and shared fascinating stories about his journey and how he started. And I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to MentorZ. Today we have on George Forman III. George, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you. Glad to be with you all.
Wonderful. When it comes down to my guests, I always love going down to the origin story. So you can start as far back as you'd like, but, where did you come from and how did you grow up the way you did?
I'm from Houston, Texas, originally, and, my life is very, 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 very much connected with, my father, as a student, and I'll talk about that. As a student, I was kind of geeky and nerdy, did okay in math, did excellent in science, and typically did really good at anything I was interested in. Always got A's, but everything else was kind of a struggle. Even when I got an A, it was a struggle if I didn't have interest. Quiet kid, shy kid, asked a lot of questions, and that was pretty much me. I like to eat a lot too, as it relates to things I did outside of being a nerd, was working for my dad, and for us, you're never too young to work. So between the ages of at all times, we grew up working on a ranch. When I was old enough, got a chance to appear in multiple commercials for brands like Doritos, Oscar Mayer, Meineke Car Care Center, HBO, and a few others, and got a chance to be on TV shows, got a chance to be in the news, got a chance to be in People magazine, and so on and so forth, just by virtue of I'm my dad's son, they're featuring him, and he was always, he always talked about his family a lot in the press. He was a professional boxer in the 60s, the 70s, 60s and 70s, had become world champion, retired in the late 70s, became a preacher. And that's the guy I grew up with. I was born in 83. And then in the late 80s, right around the time I was 7-ish, he decided to mount a comeback to the sport. And it was a really high profile comeback because he pretty much went out on top, and he came back at the bottom and just didn't apologize for it and was overweight. And, it was kind of a sports legend, i.e. Muhammad Ali. After his legend is gone and people are talking about him, and he shows up at events and everybody's like, "Oh my God, the legend is here!" He already had all that, and then he went back and said, "I'm going to be just like everybody else and start from the bottom." And so it was really awkward and weird for not just him, but the whole family. Seeing him, the sports reporters say really bad stuff about him. But he was able to mount a pretty good comeback in the early 90s, and went on to gain his championship again about 8 years after that. So, at that point, he became so popular that me, once again, always working in training camps at my dad's hip, helping him prepare for whatever, stretching him, counting his rounds, filming his sparring matches, sparring in the gym, preparing for his boxing matches. Although I did that, I had other stuff I wanted to do. So when I was 12, I asked my dad if I could go to boarding school, and he agreed. And he actually took me to boarding school, flew me up here to Boston. We found a place. And I did that because that would allow me to play 3 sports, and no one would have to take me to the game and pick me up. Participate in extracurricular activities, participate in student government, and go on field trips and rafting, and the list goes on, all the opportunities I got. At home, my parents were as hands-on as it gets, but there was 10 of us. Plus, a major celebrity career in the household which is, most people don't understand, like a major celebrity, it's kind of like running a big business, There's a lot that has to get done to get the celebrity to kind of be able to show up and do what they need to do. So, just not enough hands going around for 10 kids and a major celebrity. So, but I was always with him. So it wasn't like we had a bad childhood. We had an awesome childhood. He was like, literally, we call him Mother Hen. But in terms of all of us having extracurricular activities, that was just not feasible unless we were all going to have our own babysitter, So, which is why I embraced going to boarding school and had a great time. So did that and went to a place called Faith School for 3 years. Then I not transferred. It only goes up to 9th grade. So I graduated and went to a school called Governor Dummer on the North Shore of Boston. And after a year there, wanted to become a pilot, had interest in flying planes, and I found the only school in the world, I think, boarding school that had an airport was Culver Military Academy. So I went there for a summer program, loved it, called my dad midway through the summer and asked him if I could stay for winter school. And he agreed. He thought I was crazy once again, because remember, I was years before that, I was 11 saying I wanted to go to boarding school, which is often, I might be the only kid that ever did that. And he said, yeah, you can go. So I made my way to Culver. Found out, during a recruiting program between my 11th and 12th grade year at the Air Force Academy that I wouldn't be able to fly the planes I wanted to fly because of my sitting height, or at least I wouldn't be first in line to fly them. And so that kind of deflated me. And I think selfishly, because I couldn't fly the planes I wanted to fly, I decided not to go to the military academy. I regret that sometimes. And so I went to Pepperdine University. Said, let me just, for once, be a regular student and not have a strict regimen. And studied business while I was there. And midway through that experience, I got an opportunity to work for my father full-time as his business manager. So I moved back to Houston, transferred to Rice University in Houston. They didn't have a business major, but they had a great, it was a great school. To me, one of the best schools in Houston. And so I went, even though they didn't have a business major, and I just changed my major to kinesiology with a focus in sports marketing. Now sports business is a full major. But at the time it was like brand new. So anyway, did that, graduated, continued to work for my father, and working for him, I did everything from, working licensing deals, representing him as an author, as talent for TV shows, movies, endorsements, everything from clothing to shoes to watches to grills. He had already done that deal by the time I came into the picture, but I would work on contract extensions, traveling with him, approving scripts for infomercials, approving media tours, et cetera, booking him for shows like Jimmy Kimmel, or Jay Leno at the time, David Letterman, and the list goes on. So my life was pretty busy, and loved it. And partway through that experience, kind of, they say, living high on the hog, I was, my life was spent in hotels, eating room service, and flying around on private jets, which was awesome. And I would love to go back to it, by the way. But I gained a lot of weight, and got into boxing as a way to lose some weight, and got so interested in it that I wanted to see what a real fight would be like. And I had the bet going with my brothers. They said I wouldn't do it. And I told my dad I was going to have this amateur fight, and he said, let me train you. And somewhere along, there's a long story there, but the point is he encouraged me to have a professional fight because I wouldn't have to worry about the amateur pulling out last minute, right? Mm-hmm. The amateurs don't get paid. And so had a professional fight, wasn't a tough one at all. And then after that, me and him had put so much work into it. He had trained me. I had trained for a year before he agreed to train me, and then we trained for another year. And we put in so much work, some of the hardest work I've ever done in my life, like where I thought a couple of times I thought I was just going to die. And we just both decided, like, let's keep doing this. It would be fun, without really talking about it, And I ended up having 15 professional fights. And while I was training to be a pro fighter, I was also training people at my youth center, my dad's youth center, to box. few hours before and after I would train that day, and developed a passion for it. And so on a trip to Boston, I was visiting one of my friends from that original boarding school I mentioned, and he came and decided to open a boxing gym in Boston, which I thought would be cool. And, ended up just staying and doing it. And so today I have, Everybody Fights boxing gyms. We focus on a lot more than boxing, but we're known for our boxing component. We have 6 locations. We opened in 2014, so we're about 6 years in almost. And we're on our way to going to another 10 locations next year, and hopefully within 3 or 4 years, maybe 40, 50 locations.
Well, it's phenomenal. Again, you have quite a long journey, especially when it comes to your training, especially when it comes to all the ups and downs you had to go through in order to get to where you are today. One of the things that I found very interesting, because I was at Culver Academy when I first saw you speak, and I was absolutely fascinated by the fact of just the sheer endurance and the sheer willpower you had to have in the first training sessions with your dad. Must have been grueling. What was the mentality you had going into that, and how did you find your way out?
You mean find my way out on the training side?
Yeah, because looking at some of the regimens you guys did, I know a lot of people who would have just quit on the spot, said, "I'm not pulling that car. I'm not carrying these logs." So you're
you're asking how did I mentally get through it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know why I had this, I think quitting, how people say don't quit, that's, you've heard that before. And I think, times are changing and the definition of what it means to quit changes, For instance, there was a time where in order to move up in a company, you would have to work for wages that people would laugh at now. And you would have, you might work at a company for 5 to 6 years just to get benefits and this and that. And the goal was, if you were ever going to be anything, you had to stay at one company for maybe 15, 20 years to make anything out of yourself. The opportunities to work for entrepreneurial companies that are popping up left and right because of the opportunities tech has brought, the barriers tech has removed, and other things have removed. Those didn't always exist, So to just bounce around to 3 or 4 jobs until you find the right fit, you might never get anywhere in life, right? So this idea of quitting, sometimes that meant you might have to do something you hated for 10 years. Don't quit in order to get where you want for the rest of your life. And quitting would have meant, I hate what I'm doing, but I'm going to keep doing it anyway. I'm miserable, but I'm going to keep doing it anyway. Quitting would have been not doing that. We're saying, I don't want to be miserable. I don't care that I'm not going to be anything in life. I quit, Mm-hmm. Because now we live in a time where sometimes quitting is the right thing to do. And what I mean by that is cutting your losses, finding out why you're miserable. Is it you or is it the position you put yourself in, and moving on, cutting your losses while you can and trying to, keep tweaking and optimizing where you put your efforts. Because there's so many opportunities out there to be able to follow your passion and make a living, So that's that. And then lastly, defining quitting. I think there was a time when, if you weren't on the path or being aggressively trying to have a car, own a home, own a car, have a credit card, and have a nuclear family, if you weren't doing all those things, you had now quit on life, And now we're getting to the point where it doesn't even make sense financially for some people, it depends on where you live, to own a home, especially if you live in the city. It doesn't really make sense to own a vacation home when you can use Airbnb. It doesn't make financial sense. It makes convenient sense. It doesn't make sense to own a car. It's better to lease it, especially depending on the model and so on and so forth. All these things have changed. Families, the way having 5 kids versus 2, it's all different. And so deciding that that's not the life for you doesn't mean you quit, So going back to your question, what was I thinking about when my dad had me pulling a what was that? More almost like a Jeep through the mud, chopping wood until I was going to pass out. What got me through? And I think it was because when you're doing something as simple as hard labor and you have a task and the only goal is to complete the task. The only goal. So the goal is not to be happy. And furthermore, that goal is complete the task and you're going to be stronger for it in the end. It's a task. It's not like a career, you know? Chopping wood is not a career. It's a task. It's a task to strengthen your body, develop mental strength, mental clarity, being able to respond with strength under pressure, digging holes, sprinting, running 10 miles. That's what all that's for. The goal is to be mentally stronger and tough by finishing the task. If you quit, I feel like you get weaker, you know? So I think, you know, it was important that when we were training that I didn't set goals that were dangerous, you know? And it was my dad's job to set the goals, and somehow he was able to set those goals where, you know, I might pass out, but I'd be okay.
Yeah.
But they were just like to the brink of, you know, unconscious. But in hindsight, the mental strength that I've been able to take into my life and my career from those tasks, which are simple tasks. There was no boss. There was no, you know, it's not like other things in life. There's no like girlfriend or husband on the other side of it, you know? Mm-hmm. These are just simple tasks to develop mental strength. I knew if I quit, that it was kind of going to make me weaker in a way that was going to be hard to fix, you know? Because it would be in my brain and in my soul. So I think that's what got me through it. Just always knowing like, hey, I'm either going to get stronger or I'm going to get weaker, stronger or weaker, stronger or weaker. But it's important that I talk about defining what quit means, because I don't want people to take that out of context and think they should apply that to their career and their personal life, because there's so much more that goes into when you need to hang it up in your professional and personal life.
Oh, definitely. And even when you were talking about, you know, goal setting, you're like, the goals weren't so extreme that I couldn't complete them or I'd get hurt in the process of completing them, but they were tough enough where, you know, I really had to push hard and make that effort. Did you ever, have you found yourself in that balance in your day to day where you can have those goals every day where you're like, okay, this pushes me, but it's not a overkill?
Well, you know, the tough thing in my day to day, it's not about really whether something's challenged me too much, you know, whether it's overkill. It's more about, you know, because I'm not passing out, you know. So like mentally I have the strength to like kind of push past anything. And especially self-doubt is the hardest one to push past, because sometimes it creeps in at the most awkward times, you know. Like you might be fully, you know, ready to start a business. You've hired 7 people. You've already started the business. You've hired 7 people. You've raised $2 million. And then you're like, what am I doing? Self-doubt, you know? So it manifests itself in different ways, you know, these challenges. So yeah, I receive them, but it's more about it's just going to push me physically and mentally past my limits. I don't think it can. Anything can really, but is it going to push my lifestyle past the limits of a place where I could be happy? And, you know, I think when you're by yourself and you're single and there's no one that is going to, you know, be heard or benefit from the decision, that's one thing. But when you have employees, you know, that you're risking their livelihood, right? And risking their happiness, and you have a family. I have definitely been faced with challenges where I have to ask myself, am I going to put my relationships, friends, family under stress? That they're not aligned to benefit from the way I am, you know? You know, in terms of the outcome. So that's really the challenge, to not be selfish, because you may have the energy and the wherewithal to push past these challenges that are placed in front of you professionally, for instance. But then you do it and you look up, you don't have a husband, a wife, a friend, co-workers, you know, because you did it and you're successful and everything, and you wiped out everybody in the process. So I think that's really the challenge sometimes. Yeah.
I mean, especially when, you know, you have that fighter mentality. A lot of times when you fight, you know, it's just you against one person, one opponent. But you're fighting for much more than that. You know, you're fighting for your family or your team members. How do you keep that all into a balance? Like how, you know, in those situations, what's the opponent? How do you make sure you can tackle that while keeping, everyone else safe?
You mean in a business sense, or can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. In a business sense of, what something might happen with budgeting, or something might happen with, when, something might fall through in the business. How do you make sure you can take care of yourself, fight the problem, and be that leader? Because, you are the leader in your company, in order to, making sure everyone else is okay. And even in the family sense, like my dad, he's a father, and when we had to move, right, he was really scared because he's like, I can't be selfish, but I got to take care, and I have to take care of my family. But, we have to do this one thing. How is everything going to be safe?
Yeah, I think it's two things. I think you enlist the support of people as much as you can. You can't tell everybody everything sometimes, but you enlist them in the process. And, I think you balance putting them first and, really clearly defining what that means. I always go back to defining what that means, defining whatever the standard is, defining what it means. And so, thinking of your employees, you put them first, and you're like, you know what, we're going to have to do something. Like, we're going to have to lower wages, for instance, lower salaries for 8 months, right? So if right off the bat, if you're like, man, put your employees first, well, okay, I have to lower my salary too. But then there's also like, is there a way not to? If they're first, why not? How about we keep their salaries the same or maybe raise them? But then if you bring them all to the table and say, hey guys, we need to invest in a specific technology that's going to increase our profitability and competitive advantage over the next 7 years. But it's going to require that the budget's got to come from somewhere. Everyone's going to have to take a $7,000 a year pay cut, right? For the next, on an annual basis for the next 8 or 9 months or the next 12 months. But on the other side of this is we're going to increase our profitability by 8 to 9%. And that's going to increase the payback to our investors, the speed by 2 to 3 years, which means, number one, we can all make more money and get our bonuses at the end of the year, and they'll be bigger 2 years from now. Number two, if we have an exit, everybody will get a bigger share in the exit. I'm just making up a scenario, Yeah. And so you put that in front of them and say, hey, this may or may not work. But the only reason I would reduce everybody's salaries right now is because it's going to be a bigger win for us. And if I don't, I'm going to have to look at myself in the mirror 3 years from now and know I didn't do the best thing for you guys, or at least I didn't give you the option. And so I think you kind of have to start off by putting them first, defining what that is. And then lastly, I think it's really important when it involves other people to set a time, set parameters, or let them know like, hey, this will only be for a time, and make sure that for yourself and them that, when you're asking everybody to sacrifice and suck it up, there's some limits and some timestamps that they can be looking forward to. This is only going to be for a time. And it's also important that you know that, so that makes you hold yourself accountable and keep yourself honest to make sure, hey, I'm asking everybody to sacrifice. I'm the leader. I'll sacrifice everything. I'll sacrifice my entire salary. But that's not, they shouldn't, carry that whole load themselves. And I got to figure this out within a year or 2 years or 6 months. And I think that goes for family and everything. If you're a leader, it's a type of responsibility you have to take.
Yeah. When it comes down to things like leadership and, you're talking about authenticity and responsibility, those are some really big character traits. And building character is one heck of a thing sometimes. How have you found yourself building character in yourself and others?
I think the biggest thing is building characters, putting people in tough situations and letting them crawl their way out of it. But I think you can't throw them into the fire without giving them fair preparation. And I think fair preparation is, number one, allowing them to see you do it a number of times. Number two, explaining to them why you do everything you do, why you respond to conflict the way you do, right? Because life is just about navigating conflicts. And then thirdly, giving them a chance to do it with your supervision a little bit. So you can jump in at teachable moments, say, oh, well, think about it this way. Well, what if you thought about it this way? And then at some point, you got to pull the cord, cut the cord, let them go. Let them make mistakes, and try to make sure that, you watch them enough to catch them before they make the same mistake again, teachable moment. And then eventually, with enough leash and teachable moments, they shouldn't be making the same mistakes over and over. And if they are, they're not the person for the gig. And then you have to have that hard conversation and try to put them somewhere where they excel, whether that's with you or with another company, and be active in that process. That's how I see helping your people grow with character.
Yeah. That's how you can train others. Is that a similar strategy to how you can train yourself?
I think with yourself, you just play for more than you can afford to lose. At the times when you have that opportunity, like for instance, when I was starting my business at Everybody Fights, like I was the founder, I was by myself. So if I wanted to spend 100 hours and nobody was calling me, nobody was texting me, everybody thought I just quit boxing, and everybody knew I wasn't getting checks. So like, there's nothing to really bother me about, right?
Yeah.
So so I'd sit in the office for about 6 a.m. to about 1 midnight. No, like 6 a.m. to 12, and then I'd commute home and back. And so what's that? 20 hours a day? No, 19. And just work on a business plan over and over and over and over and over. And because I was planning for my whole career, like if I, that kept going that went on for another year longer without any success, I was going to be homeless. So I think playing for more than you're willing to lose, that could be putting I put all my money into it. I didn't have millions of dollars to put into it, but I had many thousands. I put all that into the business, and that was my personal money. But I also didn't have a child, family, a wife. I didn't have employees. So I played for more than I could afford to lose, and I figured it out. And I think it was an extremely stimulating process. Because I was in that situation, the only people that I could align with in growth, which is now my business partner, are people who really brought value and who could also make me better. So that was a lesson. But getting through that, the physical activity from boxing definitely helped a lot, by the way. I think everybody can just jump right in and start doing that. Everyone can encourage people from the organizations to get into physical activity, and to also train as a group. That brings something to your professional prowess. Like instantly, But in terms of things like career-based, I think when you have those opportunities, dig in, and if you come out on the other side, or if you fail 3 or 4 times and you keep pushing and keep figuring it out, I think you end up on the other side of that with a lot of confidence and character.
Yeah, and experience as well. That's actually one of the questions I was most excited to ask you about. In your whole career of boxing, and you have a business, Everybody Fights. Everybody Fights. What is a fighter, and what can boxing teach individuals?
A fighter is someone who doesn't look forward to conflict, but is stimulated by conflict. And stimulated in a somewhat positive way. The worst of them doesn't come out in conflict. The worst of them comes out in nothing. Like when nothing's going on, there's nothing to do. It's kind of like a bored dog puppy. The worst of them comes out in stagnancy, or when there's nothing to do. The best of them comes out when there's work to do, and the very best, the superhuman version of them, comes out when there's an extreme amount of conflict. And the fighter is someone who can look back on extreme amounts of conflict and kind of smile, because whether they came out on the better side of that conflict or not, they kept their character. I think, to me, that's a fighter. What was your second question?
Oh, my second question was, what can individuals learn from boxing?
I think what people can learn from boxing is what happens before the fight, and understanding. I think boxers are some of the, when they do it properly, some of the most well-conditioned athletes in the world, mentally, physically, spiritually. When they're training, they always have someone watching and providing correction till their last day. As a legend, they have someone watching them training at all times and say, "Nope, I saw this. You need to fix this. That was 1 inch off. You used to be 6 inches away from that punch. Now you're only 2. You're a little slower. We need to work on this. When you were young, this worked to get you in shape. Now we have to try something else. When you were young, you could eat this. Now we have to eat something different." They always have someone on top of them, even when they're considered a living legend, helping them correct and tweak till the end of their career. So I think that's what they can learn. And then, secondly, is there's some things that go without saying. Like, you shouldn't even be talking about being a boxer. I'm talking about boxing right now, without doing certain things. You got to do your road work. You got to run. That's part of conditioning. You got to do your push-ups, your sit-ups. You have to get sleep. You have to be focused. You have to eat properly. You have to hydrate. You have to build strength, endurance. And all these things have nothing to do with throwing a punch.
Mm-hmm.
You may not even throw a punch in developing all those things. That's just part of being like, that's like gatekeeper type stuff. Like, you shouldn't be let through the gates to even step in the ring and practice the sport without those things. And I think being an entrepreneur, a business owner, or being a part of a team, being an employee, there's certain things that we should not even have to talk about, you know? So like with my running, my dad, when as a trainer, he was like, how was your run this morning? He didn't ask me, did you run this morning? You know?
Oh yeah.
How long was your run this morning? How fast did you do it? And not did you run, you know? And so on and so forth. So I think that's the number one thing I think we can pull from is you need to establish what are the things we need to do just to be competitive and safe and to respect the sport of whatever we're doing, even though it may not be an actual competitive sport. And then number two, the other thing you can pull from boxing is sparring. Sparring is, proper sparring is going over and over and over and over again, all your moves. So your jab, that's a strategic move, and you practice it on your sparring partners. You may not throw it 100%, but you throw it 80%. You may not throw it right at their chin and their teeth or their eyes or their nose where you can hurt them, but you throw it to the slight left or the right of their head, so you can throw a lot of them, right? Your defense, you may, instead of beating up your sparring partner, because you need to practice your defense, you may say, you know what, I'm going to put myself in a position to encourage him to throw as many hooks today as possible. And you practice every trick in the book to block that hook, So this is technique. And you should be always practicing your technique, coming up with new techniques, studying, because what works for you, being a tall fighter or a strong fighter or a fast fighter, whatever, may not work for other fighters. Everybody's got to figure out how do they win technique-wise. Mm-hmm. You have to study other people's technique as much as you can so that you can be prepared to compete against them. And then sometimes you may study their technique and say, you know what, I like that. I'm going to use that. But if for no other reason, even if you're like, I know everything I need to know for myself, you need to know and be prepared for what might be put in front of you. So technique and constantly like studying other techniques and also refining your own.
Yeah, definitely.
But let's not even talk about technique if we're not doing the road work.
100%.
The simple things, So.
Well, yeah, you're laying the groundwork. That's where everything comes up. When you have that groundwork settled down, I think in entrepreneurialism or I think in life, that groundwork is always that experience and that mentality. So you can go out and attack the problem. Yeah. But when it comes to the parallel of sparring and the parallel of studying and watching your opponent, how do you know which punches to throw? How do you know how to go, all right, here's the obstacle. They're doing a lot of, move X. I should use move, A, B, or C. How do you look at that and evaluate and then approach the problem?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I think, and I hate to just say that, it's like one that people don't think about. To me, there's many different ways to approach it. Some people just focus on what they're doing. I like to focus on what others are doing that I may have to compete with or collaborate with. And if you look at boxing as a collaboration, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I have to do something that respects what the other person is doing, or shows that, that reflects, is somewhat reflective of what they're doing. If you want to win on the highest level, where people actually have a corner, they have strategies, they have experience, they know how to make adjustments, you got to be really in tune with what they're doing. So I think it starts with understanding and I'm talking about extraordinary talent, that you have to fight. There's regular fighters who just throw punches, and there's extraordinary competitors, okay? So for regular fighters, you just do what you're supposed to do, and that's if you're an extraordinary talent, and you should just run through them. All things being equal, extraordinary talent versus extraordinary talent, what makes this person extraordinary? Is it their conditioning? Is it their speed? Is it the length of their arms? Is it the combinations? Is it the fact that they're really good at letting you throw the first punch first? What is it? So let's just say, for instance, it's their jab. They have an awesome jab, which is just the closest punch to you, and it's very direct. It's long, it's straight, and it doesn't require a lot of commitment to throw it. The jab. If they have a great jab, I shouldn't be focused on shooting my jab. I should be focused on stopping theirs, figuring out how to get them not only to stop it, but get them to stop throwing it. Okay. Now that's their number one tool. I figured that out. And there's many different ways to do it. I won't get into it. The point is, I shut down the jab. Take that tool away. What other tools do they have in their shed? Oh, this guy has a good right hook to the body. Got to take that away. What am I going to do to not only stop him from doing it, stop, block, but encourage him not to do it anymore, right? Sometimes that's making him throw a bunch of them. Who knows? Number 3, he might have good footwork. All right, well, I got to slow his feet down. Typically, you do that by beating the core and or just forcing them to use their feet, their resources, right? But the point is, and some people just have a lot of conditioning. They can throw a lot of punches. So it's like, all right, that's your strength. Let's throw a lot of punches. I'm going to make sure I can survive until you're done throwing all those punches and suck and win. And the minute you get an extraordinary fighter to look up and say, I can't use my tools, and I'm exhausted, I'm tired, my resources are exhausted, they become what we call a regular fighter, regular boxer. And when you have an extraordinary talent facing a regular boxer, it's a lot of fun to be the extraordinary talent. And it becomes easy. So the question is, how do I take an extraordinary talent and turn them into a regular boxer? And that's by taking their tools away and forcing them to do things that they did not practice. Simplest way to do that, sometimes it's just getting in their ear and frustrating them and talking trash. But the most direct way to do it is to make them tired.
Yeah. I can see a lot of parallels with that with, many different obstacles in someone's life, especially when it comes to like situations inside or outside of your control, especially when it comes to like humanizing a like an elementary example, like humanizing a bully. Like, oh, he's so big and he's so tough and he's so strong. It's like, no, he's a kid. He's a kid. Your age, you're gonna be fine. And then tapering down that the extraordinary talent of this bully who makes fun of you can now become, this regular person. And so you've taken away those quote unquote tools of them and be like, what gives you the right to make fun of me? And you can use that at your.
And you know what? Mm-hmm. And there's 2 ways to look at it depending on which side of it you are. But like, I think there's obvious strengths and advantages, and there's ones that are not as obvious, right? Sometimes the ones that are not as obvious are the most threatening. You heard of the story of David and Goliath?
I do.
And David had like a stone and a sling, a rock. Is that right? He had a rock.
Mm-hmm.
That he threw. Is that right? I just can't remember if that was just the cartoons or the actual story. But the point is, like, you look at Goliath, and David looked at Goliath and said, "Oh my God, he's a giant, and everybody's afraid of him. He's massive, powerful. Nobody's stronger than him, and it's impossible to beat him. Everybody thinks it's impossible. He's a giant." So everybody else cried and got scared and said, "What are we going to do?" David said, "Oh, I have a stone. I'm going to hit him right in the head." That's what David said. He didn't say, "Oh, this is a giant. I need a rock for this." Now the giant looked at David and said, "He's a tiny man. I'm just going to crush him." And I had the giant been a little bit more clever and thought, maybe why is this guy standing right in front of me like he's going to do something? Everybody else runs. He must have something up his sleeve. Giant could have just turned away and walked away, and the whole story would have been different. But he looked at what he had and looked at David like he was everybody else, and he wasn't thinking about the rock. And so I think it's all about which side of it you're on, and just never taking anything for granted, That's kind of a hard one to understand, but I think, there's a little wisdom in that, if you know what I mean. So.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I know for a fact that you grew up working alongside a nonprofit. So having that gratitude and having that, that discipline and that worth ethic is going to really come in handy.
Yeah.
Definitely. And actually, have you ever been in the situation where you were David or Goliath?
Yeah, all the time. I think the reason I love that analogy is because and you may have heard this when I spoke the other day, I don't bring it up as much, but I brought it up when I was talking, is that, in being a leader, you're faced with these David and Goliath situations all the time where, everybody's crying and saying, scared that we have to deal with Goliath. What are we going to do? Let's fold it up. Let's quit. or let's just keep doing what we're doing and slowly get eaten up, because like, hey, we're just going to go down fighting, but we don't have like we're not actually trying to fight to win. We're just fighting to say we fought, and I think, as a leader, you have to step up and say, hey, I got this stone. I think I can do something, because sometimes it's literally like, there's no way you're going to be a giant, right? It's just absolutely impossible because, in the business world, it takes a long time to become a giant. But if you know exactly where to nail that giant, exactly where to hit the giant, and you practice with that stone, and you only have to throw it once, and you're accurate, and you know exactly where to throw that thing, you can make big things happen. And the minute that happens, the amount of confidence and enthusiasm that it puts into everybody behind you, those people that were scared, that becomes the giant.
Oh, definitely.
You do a lot with that.
Definitely. And unfortunately, we are running a little out of time because I know you have a hard stop at 2. But George, thank you so much for being on. I thoroughly enjoyed having you on.
Awesome. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks speaking to you, and look forward to seeing you develop with your podcast. Congrats.